There's a part of me that wants us to have this dialogue because when you have it, you grow. And yet, because it is right now so polarizing, there's a part of me that says, let's just leave it outside of the workplace. I mean, I'm sitting in my home office. This is my workplace, right? And so we need to be able to be in environments where we can be ourselves and represent and have that conversation. You know, we're a small team of 18, and we are definitely all kinds of different camps, right? But we're respectful about that. And we seek to understand from each other. And I think that's the problem right now. We're judging and not actually listening to each other. My husband and I can't even remember the TV show. I just remember somebody saying, put down the gavel, take off the robe, and stop judging. And that has stuck with me. And I think in this political environment, we have to stop judging each other and just seek to understand where each other's coming from.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Hart Hustle Podcast. I'm incredibly excited because we have an amazing leader here sitting across this digital table with us. We have the president and partner of True You and ML Talent Strategies, also the COO and partner of SRV HR, Chris Mills. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kenan. It's great to be here.
This is going to be an exciting conversation. We're not only going to talk about your heart and hustle, what brought you to be this person who sits across from me today, but we're also going to talk about some things at the time of recording are really important to workplace culture, human resources. We're going to talk about political discourse in the workplace, work-life integration and professional boundaries, remote work and the importance of social engagement, and so much more. So before we kind of get into today's conversation, Chris, how's your heart doing today?
You know, my heart is full. Speaking of work-life balance, I spent the morning with my godson, his wife, and their little 18-month-old at the Children's Museum. So I'm coming home. My heart is full.
What kind of stuff did you guys explore at the Children's Museum? What was that like?
You know, with an 18-month-old, it's anything that's sensory, right? So we were in the music room banging on drums and xylophones. We were playing in the sand, the water, the train, the tractor, the carousel, you name it, we were there. And he came home exhausted.
I bet. There's so many memories. My mom used to always take me to the Seattle Science Center when I was a little kid. And that was all interactive, all sensory, all engagement and stuff like that. And it just helped me explore the world at such a young age. And so it's so cool that you could be a part of those early memories as well. I'm sure that he'll remember those for the rest of his life.
Kenan, what's interesting is Taylor Swift might be in town this weekend in Indianapolis. And so all of the dinosaurs had on their little Swiftie bracelets, and there's all these little girls in their little Swiftie outfits doing dances and all of the things.
Could you imagine being a person in society that has that much influence over the world where dinosaurs start to kind of get their Swiftie on?
It's crazy.
Wow.
It was crazy to see.
So one of the things that I think is really important to talk about, we talked a little bit about your titles here, and congratulations on the new president roles in so many of these organizations that you support. Super excited for you. But you're the partner and president at True You and ML Talent Strategies, the COO and partner at SRV HR. First of all, how did we get here? What type of student were you? Why did we choose to, I would say, devote so much of our time and energy into these spaces? And why are they important for the work that you do?
You know, I was a student athlete. And so it was all about teams and the engagement that you could have within the teams. And I think that kind of set me up for the workplace, right? Of wanting to be a leader on a team, really, in so many different ways. And I never really thought I'd be a partner in a business, honestly. My husband owns his own business. I'm not much of a risk taker. So two people owning their own business, that's a little risky. But I have an incredible partner, and the setup is just amazing. And he's kind of the visionary and I am the implementer. So we complement. And then we've been able to bring on two smaller percentage partners, but two other partners that just, you know, they just round us out. And the team is fully going and moving forward. And as you can tell, you know, we've added a third business and it just keeps growing.
Oh my gosh, so cool. Here's a question for you. A lot of the leaders who I speak to often were athletes or a part of teams. What do you think about that team element of playing sports What are the key things that you were able to transfer into being a leader of an organization and building teams around that? Do you take any of those those core pillars of those sports experiences into business?
The first one, and we talk about this a lot internally because we have a lot of salespeople, is we win together and we lose together. And sometimes for salespeople in particular, they can feel like they're out on an island, and right, because they feel this pressure to bring in the sell. And we are all about the fact that that's not how it works. We win together, we lose together, just like a team does, right? It's not an individual contributor, it's everybody collectively making it happen. And so that is really ingrained. And then I think there's also just this piece of you're going to have different roles on a team, just like you do in an organization. And they're all important and they all make an impact. And so if you discount anybody, you're really discounting the team. And so I was never a star on any of my teams, right? But I started and I had a role that was very important for me to play for the team to be able to win.
As I get a little bit older, I start thinking, I think if you've ever heard of a guy named Alex Hermosi, he's really big in the entrepreneurship space. He's a 34-year-old entrepreneur, has a family office now with a portfolio about businesses that do about 400 or 500 million a year. So very successful, younger guy.
Yeah.
He had a post on LinkedIn this morning that said, when I was younger, I thought me as the founder and owner of the business needed to take home as much as I possibly could in dollars and equity of the organization. As I started getting older, I recognized Bill Gates owns 1% of Microsoft. Jeff Bezos owns 9% of Amazon, and Elon owns 17% of Tesla. One thing you start to recognize is the more money and value you provide for everybody else, the more starts to flow your way as well. It kind of gets you out of that scarcity into that abundance mindset, if that makes sense, in building a team.
It does. And we talk a lot about the abundance mindset because, it goes with your growth mindset at the same time. You're going to have times where things aren't going to quite go the way you want them to. The sale's not going to close. You're going to lose a client that you've been working with, and you can really then start to get into that scarcity piece until you look across the organization and realize how the whole team is doing. And that's important. And one of my partners, Amber, she's great at thinking about it from an abundance mindset. And that infiltrates the rest of the organization.
Normally, I would wait to ask this question, but with all of your success and being able to stand up multiple companies, are there any key lessons that you would go back to a younger version of Chris? If you had 5 minutes of uninterrupted time where you could sit across the table from her and say, hey, listen, in the following years, you're going to navigate this time. Here's some mindset challenge or some ways to lean into a mindset. These are the things you should focus on as being a leader. What advice would you give to that younger version of yourself?
The first one, and it's a recency factor for me, Keenan, is to understand how to be purposeful about being a legacy leader, because you're going to make a difference and you need to be purposeful about making that difference. And I knew at a young age, like, you make impact on people, and yet I wasn't purposeful about it. I didn't think about it, right? I didn't have a plan. And to really be that strong leader that's going to leave a legacy, you got to really think about it and kind of challenge yourself to be that leader. And if you don't, then it's going to be happenstance. And that means that it could turn out in all kinds of different ways. And in some ways you don't want it to.
What do you think your legacy that you're being really intentional about is going to be when you're, turning the chapters of this leadership journey?
This is going to sound a little selfish a little bit, I think, but I definitely pour into people. Like, I love to pour into people. I love to have an impact on people. And that's not just about them being a teammate in my organization. They're a whole person that works for me, right? And I want to influence and help them be the best self they can be, whether that's with my company, another company, at home, a parent, a sibling, whatever that looks like. That's what I feel like my legacy is that I've helped people be that best version of themselves.
I love that. Because I spend so much time in healthcare, there's a terminology that's been used over the last, I'm going to say 5 years really heavily. It's just whole person health, right? It's mental health, cardiovascular, physical health, or emotional health, XYZ. When we talk about work, I feel like we're in a completely different landscape of how people expect work to be represented in their lives. Right now, at the time of recording this, right, we have a lot of conversations that are happening everywhere about the current political landscape. We've got Kamala and we've got Trump. People are really in two camps at this point in time. How do you think we can do a better job of helping people feel comfortable to bring those conversations into the workspace? Or do you feel like it's inappropriate to bring those conversations into the workspace, especially with how our lives are kind of formulated today?
I think it's so hard to bring it into the workplace. And I want it to be okay, right? There's a part of me that wants us to have this dialogue because when you have it, you grow. And yet, because it is right now so polarizing, there's a part of me that says, let's just leave it outside of the workplace. But where I ultimately land, Keenan, is realizing that, I mean, I'm sitting in my home office. This is my workplace, right? And so we need to be able to be in environments where we can be ourselves and represent and have that conversation. We're a small team of 18 and we are definitely all kinds of different camps, right? But we're respectful about that and we seek to understand from each other. And I think that's the problem right now. We're judging and not actually listening to each other. My husband and I can't even remember the TV show. I just remember somebody saying, put down the gavel, take off the robe, and stop judging. And that has stuck with me. And I think in this political environment, we have to stop judging each other and just seek to understand where each other's coming from. Now, I'm a third camp, by the way. I'm considering buying a private island and just moving
Me
there.
too. If you need help on rent or mortgage, let me know. I'm in. I'm 100% in.
I'm just going.
There was a CEO I had on the podcast out of Indiana as well, represents an organization called Josiah Whites. And they're a youth, I would say, empowerment organization. They help individuals who have gotten in trouble in the judicial system. They come to camp and they help build them as leaders to be able to kind of change the ways and some of the decisions that they've been making. Now, Matthew was on the podcast and we were talking about the difference of differences and division. He said, it's okay for us to have differences because differences are things that we can look at, understand, and be inquisitive enough to explore and see why people think differently. And we can come to a mutual understanding. But in today's society today, it seems like we've leaned super heavy into the division aspect. It's us or them. It's the othering that we do so well. Why do you feel like this has become so easy for us over the recent years when it's at Camp A versus Camp B? What do you think's going on?
As a kid growing up, there was always politics, right? I mean, there's always voting and all of the things. I think back to like my early 20s, it was more of that difference versus the division piece. And as we've come as a society and we've become more diverse as a society, I feel like that diverseness has actually caused division. And a part of that is because we, again, as a society, aren't accepting people for who they are, right? And because we don't do that, we start to judge. And when we start to judge, we start to divide. And there's always been political parties, but my husband even talked about this. We were just talking about this. He's like, it used to be you didn't necessarily vote by party, you voted by candidate. And now the parties are so divisive in their takes and the direction that they're taking that the society has gone the same way. And if you think about it, the political ads are more aggressive than they've ever been.
Oh my goodness. You are so right. I was literally at the early morning, 6 a.m. this morning. I was getting a haircut and I'm walking into the barber shop. We're turning on all the lights and my barber turns on the television. First ad that was on there was Donald Trump said this, or Sam Brown here in the state of Nevada said that, or Kamala's doing this. And I was like, how do you listen to this stuff all day? And she said, Keenan, honestly, it's kind of like white noise at this point in time. Like emotionally, I used to get involved in these ads and these commercials, but now they just are coming at us so hot and heavy that it's like I really can't even listen to this stuff anymore. Do you ever get worried about the overstimulation of media and like all the images that are meant to kind of divide us that we get forced in our face every day?
Yeah, I think it's creating because think about this. It's not TV, right? It's the social media where it's playing out. And it's not just our candidates that are playing it out. I mean, the things that people feel comfortable saying on social media that they would never say to you face to face, It's crazy. And I worry about the younger generation because that's their life, right? I mean, for me, I have a life outside of TV because I didn't grow up that way. I have a life outside of this crazy phone and those sorts of things. But that's their connection. And it's so much easier for me to just quickly like make a snarky comment, and I would probably never do it face to face.
Never.
Yeah. But that barrier that's there causes us to feel comfortable doing it.
Yeah, the anonymity, the distance, right, is very scary. I remember when I was growing up, I was born in 1990. When I was in high school and things like that, I used to hear older adults say, you guys have lost all interpersonal communication ability. And this is on the very cusp of AIM and instant messenger and things like that. Now I think about where we are in a society. We've created so much comfort in the anonymity of being able to type whatever we want. I almost kind of have to think about, what is the appropriate way to react to these people online who say these horrible things? Naturally, we can get upset and we can kind of battle back with them, but that doesn't do anything. I feel like we need to come from a place of empathy to think about, this person is in such a bad place. They are so hurt that they are now lashing out at other people on the internet to try and make them feel the same way that we feel or they feel, which is a really interesting concept to think about, how people want to pull us back down when they're not feeling well. But I guess it speaks to the larger kind of mindset of where we're at in society today. There's a lot of people hurting.
There are a lot of people hurting. And I have a great friend that teaches empathy. That's what her job is. I mean, her company, she teaches empathy, and her business is exploding because businesses know that they need to help their leaders and all of their team members understand that. And I talk about this in a class that I facilitate. And it's funny because I'll say empathy, right? And people are like, is it empathy? Is it sympathy? What is it? And I said, well, think about empathy as putting myself in somebody else's shoes, looking at it from their lens. And we're not always willing to do that. And that's really where we should be spending our time, especially as leaders, seeking to understand. It's an old Stephen Covey habit, right? It's been around for years, but seeking to understand where people are coming from is still a foundational action.
I'm going to change this into the lens of leaders today, especially, as you started the conversation today, you said, I'm working from home. I'm also in my home office. If we look around us, I'm not sure about you, but we are isolated in our own space. We are alone very often in this space together. How do you think about the role of leaders being able to empathize and put themselves in someone's situation and their footsteps and shoes when we don't know what's on the other side of the screen? I see a well curated like square that Chris sits in, and you see mine, but you don't see the other things that are happening in my life. How do we kind of put ourselves in the place of empathy to empathize with people when we don't really know what's going on other than this digital connection?
Yeah, I think it's important because, and we're also so scrunched on time. So let's not forget that, right? Like we're trying to squeeze as much as we can into this little window of time. And I'm a firm believer in regular one-to-one connection times with my team members, right? And that's a dedicated time. We use it however they want to use it. But I want to make sure that during that time, we're not just talking business. I'm finding out what's going on with them, right? And so I have a good friend. She uses the term. She'll say, "What's your number?" Because we're comfortable saying on a scale of 1 to 10 how I'm doing, but we're not comfortable saying things like, "You know what? I'm really anxious today. My anxiety is really high." We haven't gotten there because people freak out when we say it. But if I can say, "Hey, I'm a 6," then a leader can say, "Okay, I know where this person's mind is and I know how to then interact with them." But you have to start those connection times with checking in on people. And it can't be just on your Slack or your chat channel. It has to be this way. Even if it's virtual, it has to be, let me check in on you.
With all the different organizations that you support and leaders who you interact with, how are people navigating? Because this is 2024. We're 4 years past the pandemic now, which is crazy to think about how quickly time has gone. But what about these professional boundaries that are so important in kind of establishing where work lives compared to the rest of the house and the rest of my life? What does work-life integration conversations look like on your side?
Yeah, a friend of mine has given me a term that I use now. It's called work-life harmony. And I love just the visual that comes with that harmony. And when I hear music, the harmony, right? Like it just flows much smoother. Um, but the boundaries have to be really set, and it's up to the person to really do that. And when I say the person, I mean the leader, right? Like they need to be cognizant of a team's boundaries. And so, it's things as simple, Keenan, as when I work on the weekends, because I know I'm going to work on the weekends. That's me. I don't ask my team to do it, but I send my emails for delayed delivery and I spread them out over Monday. I don't want to I don't want to dump on their inbox, and I don't want to do it on the weekend because you know why? They're going to feel obligated to respond. And as a leader, you role model what behavior and what boundaries are going to be acceptable in your organization. And if you don't set boundaries for yourself and for the organization, then all of a sudden people are going to be working all over the place. The other piece though is I think we also have to understand that some jobs have more flexibility than others. And be receptive to the fact that for some people, they need to work 6 to 10 in the morning, take some time off, work again because they have elder care issues and they got to take care of a parent in the middle of the day. And by the way, that's a soapbox for me because I think we're worried about taking care of the kiddos, but we're also forgetting that a lot of people in the workplace are taking care of elders. And so we need to really, back to that whole person, understand that schedule that they need to meet their needs. If you don't have the conversation with them, then you don't know what's going on in their life. You can't help support their boundaries. And you'll create boundaries for them that aren't fair.
Two things. I saw a really interesting email signature one time, I believe it was on LinkedIn, where the CEO sent a late night email, right? Which a lot of people say you should not do. But the email signature said, hey, sometimes life gets in the way and I got to this email when I could. So this is when I'm responding to it because I had the opportunity to do so. I don't expect you to respond to this email at the same time in which I sent it. I thought that was a really interesting kind of message from a leader who's setting the tone for an organization of like, hey guys, sometimes life gets in the way and I have to respond to this email at 10 p.m. at nighttime, but I don't expect you to do so. I've been trying to implement that a little bit more. Just because we never know, like life gets lifey sometimes and it can be very challenging. But the second thing I wanted to talk about here was in order for people to, first of all, understand that there's flexibility, life gets lifey sometimes, leaders also have to have a foundation of trust in their team members. I've talked to so many leaders in the HR space and CEOs alone who often say, I have a really tough time trusting my team because they're at home, it's a Friday. How do I know what they're doing? We don't have like a tracking management system. How do I know they're getting their work done? What would you say to a leader who has that instant lack of trust for their team when they're working in a setting like this?
Well, the first thing I would say to them is, are they getting business done? Because I don't care if it took them 30 hours or if it took them 40 hours. If they took care of the customer and they got the business done, that's where my success is, right? That's what I'm looking for. And I know for some organizations, that means some weeks you're going to work 45 and 50 hours. And then the next week you're going to work 35. But sometimes we get caught up in those checking the hours and checking the boxes, and we don't look at the final results. And we should be looking at the final results. I tell my team all of the time, if you can get your work done in 35 hours, take Friday afternoon off. I'm good with that. And I think leaders need to start thinking about that. Where we struggle, Keenan, is in organizations where there's an hourly workforce that's on the clock.
Right.
And then you've got a part of the workforce that has this bigger flexibility. And we struggle with that dynamic of how can we allow flexibility over here when our hourly staff doesn't have the same flexibility. And I think culturally, then they have to think about what their foundation is. I have a partner at a business that was very clear with his organization from the very beginning. Hey, we're an on-site company. And we understand if that doesn't work for you, we will help you transition. We will help you find a job somewhere where it meets your needs. So I think knowing who you are as an organization and being upfront about that and real about that is critical.
So it is okay to take a stance in what you want the culture of your organization to be as a leader. I haven't really thought about that perspective, but yeah, sometimes you do have to put your foot down and say, hey guys, this is how we do things here. If this isn't a good fit for you, we can help you find somewhere else, but we will find other people who want to work this way as well, which is an interesting dichotomy.
I think about years ago, Zappos, right? So Zappos, years ago when they first started, I don't know if they still do it today, but they would literally pay people to leave. And what they did was with their new hires, if you came in and you didn't fit, like you didn't like the job or you didn't fit into the culture, you didn't like the culture, they would give you a bonus to leave so that would help you transition to find a job where you were a better fit. They didn't have a ton of people taking it on because they did a great job hiring and they had a great onboarding process. But the message was our culture is what it is, and we're not shifting that culture. And I think we just have to be real about that. Every business has a culture, whether you're purposeful about it or not.
How do we build a culture of healthy and happy team members, especially when they're in this work or this remote work world? Because one of the biggest challenges that I face is it's so easy for me to get into my mode and get locked into my processes every single day that social engagement often comes as a super late secondary or a tertiary priority for me. But I also recognize that I'm a human being, and spending so much time in this workspace by myself, isolated very transparently, is a real toll on my mental health. So how do we kind of create that mix of remote work and the importance for social engagement? What's your 2 cents on this?
Yeah, I am very worried about the isolation factor that's going on. I really do believe that's impacting mental health, and people aren't really understanding that because when you struggle, the first thing you want to do is isolate. But that's the worst thing for you to do is to isolate. It just feels easier to do, right? Because it's a struggle to want to go out with people. But I'm a firm believer of, um, we jokingly said back in the pandemic, everybody was like, oh, let's have a virtual happy hour and things of that nature. I don't see the problem with that. If you have a company that's 100% virtual, you still have to interact. And then I think it's also important for people to continue to have a social life. And if you're not doing that, that isolation is just so dangerous. I just worry about people a lot that way.
How do you kind of carve up your work life, your social life, and your personal space of me time? Do you have like an equation that you try and really like hit on throughout the year or throughout the week? What does that look like for you?
Oh, Keenan, it is, and my team knows, it is like, and my friends know, I have a very kind of structured schedule, I guess, in some ways, and it's something I protect. I'm up early. I'm an early morning person, so I don't recommend it for everybody, but I'm up between 4 and 4:30. I spend a fair amount of time reading my Bible, journaling, praying, exercising, all of those things, that self-care piece that's important to me, that comes before I start anything else. And then I start my day. I start my work. And then my husband and I we don't have kids, so we try to have a set dinner time every night. And then if I have to slip back into the office, I slip back into the office to do a little bit of work. But I try to make sure that friend time, that time with my husband, the time for myself gets on my to-do list first. Yeah.
How do you
And
feel
when I teach,
when
go ahead.
I was going to say, how do you feel when you don't get that me time first? This is a personal struggle that I went through for a long time. My schedule these days is literally like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'm doing a lot of these podcasts and things like that. And I said to myself, I don't have to take care of myself because I'm getting the business results. But then I found that when I woke up first thing in the morning and I'm serving other people before myself, I wasn't prioritizing my own peace and that distance that I need to create from work. So how do you feel when you don't have that personal time? Or was there a time when you really struggled with it?
Oh, definitely. I'll even have days now where as much as I protect it, it'll slip, right? And I'm off. The reality is I'm just off that day. I feel behind. I feel like I'm not fully me because I didn't have that time to engage myself. Um, and I train leaders on self-care. And I know that sounds crazy, but I do train leaders on what it means to do self-care. And I say all of the time that is not a bubble bath, that's not chocolate, that's not a glass of wine, right? Those all sound good and there's a place for
Oh
them.
yeah.
But self-care is really carving out that time where you are focused on you, whether it's time with friends, whether it's exercising, whatever it looks like for you that's putting back into your bucket.
Heard an amazing quote earlier in the week. It said, in order to lead others, you first must learn how to lead yourself. And often that means serving yourself first in the day. How did you kind of start creeping back towards that 4 a.m., 4:30 wake up time? Have you always been an early riser? I've been working on this. I get up at 5:15, but I want to push it back to 4, but I keep struggling in that space.
Yeah. I did that. I used to travel a ton for work. And so when I would travel, I'd have to get up early to get to the airport or to drive somewhere. And when I stopped traveling, I just kept getting up at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just, it's now my routine. And my husband helps me protect my going to bed time, right? Because that's the struggle is just if you're getting up between 4 and 4:30, that means you got to get to bed on time. Because if not, I'm cranky.
No, I've been cranky as well. Yeah, I've been getting a lot of flack because I've got this really cool thing on my bed. It's called 8 Sleep. It's like a mattress cover that heats and cools the the individual side of the bed, but it also wakes you up with like a vibration and stuff like that. And you can also track your sleep score. And I was looking at my girlfriend's sleep score over the last month, and she goes to bed on average about 11:30, 12 o'clock midnight because she's in PA school right now. And I'm falling asleep on average between 8:40 and 9:10. And so I was talking to her. I was like, it's so crazy to think about how we're getting the same amount of sleep, but I'm going to bed 3 hours ahead of you. And I'm also waking up 3 hours ahead of you. And she was like, this is just how my cycle works right now. And I just want to try and push her back towards those earlier bedtimes because not a lot of stuff happens at nighttime that we need to be up for. You know what I mean? Unless it's surfing on social media and things like that.
Yeah, the only thing I will say is my husband and I have been married 33 years. And then there is a time where um, I have my me time in the morning and his me time is at night.
Mm.
And so we're just, and it works well for us. So he's up until 11 o'clock at night and not getting up till 6. And I've been, I jokingly say by the time he's up and going, I'm ready for lunch. But but it works, right? And there is that me time, but that everybody has to have, and wherever that works for them, you got to put it into the schedule and make it a priority.
Comes back to that work-life harmony, right? We have to find it for ourselves, and it kind of is the perfect thing for us to say. I want to transition here a little bit into kind of an innovative and creative thought space. HR adoption of technology is not exactly on the adoption front end of a bell curve, right? Especially when we talk about things like AI and innovative technology. How are you kind of looking at things like artificial intelligence impacting the space of HR today? And what are some of the challenges maybe that we have for mass adoption?
Yeah, I think HR is playing a couple of different roles here. The first role HR should be playing is the first kind of adopter of it. Like, let's start using it so that the business sees the use of it, and show that there's worthiness and there's security in it, because people are just afraid of it, Keenan. I'm just going to be like, I talk to people and we do a lot of AI education at TrueU, and people are just afraid of it. They don't understand it. They are afraid that their work is going to get out and all the things, right? And so I just encourage people to start with simple things. One of my team members did a training session for our team, and you know what he had him do? He had him build their travel itinerary for an upcoming vacation.
I love that.
And everybody was like, oh my God, this is perfect. Right? And so if you start with something that's as simple as that, but shows you the power of it, you get more comfortable with it. And then you can start using it. And I just think HR should be an early adopter in figuring it out. We're a little bit behind on our side, but my team's using it like crazy. And we're using it for things, Keenan, that used to get in our way of being able to do the big strategic things.
Yep.
And it's removing those barriers to getting to those bigger projects that need to happen. Because I don't need to be spending my time creating a job description when I can type in some stuff and get a job description or an interview guide or a benefits guide or a compensation plan. Let me do that. Yeah.
It's interesting how me being 34 years old now, I continue to see, or at least for the first time in my life, I've started to recognize patterns, right? Where we do the same things over and over again. I often heard people back in the day say, why would we ever need the internet, right? When we have the yellow pages. And when you think about those things with a little bit of distance, you're like, oh my gosh, what were we thinking? But then it was, back even further, it was like, where are all the jobs going to go for the farmers if we implement all these tractors? Or what's going to happen on the manufacturing, in the manufacturing plants for automotive if we bring in all these robots and automation? It's just an interesting perspective how we continue to make the same type of humanistic, fear-based mistakes about technology that has the ability to transform our lives. And I just don't know if we're going to get to the point where people are easily adopting this technology because they are so hesitant to lean into a curious future. Because there are so many possibilities with this technology. If we think in November 1st of 2024 that this artificial intelligence is fully baked, we couldn't be more wrong. This is like early 2000s hearing like the dial-up sound when the internet was connecting in your house. It's going to be crazy to think about. Have you kind of gone down that path of exploring and thinking about what AI could really mean for society in general?
Yeah, from my perspective, I truly believe it's not going to replace people. It's going to make life easier. And it's like the remote control, right? I was the remote control for my dad. I got up and walked to the TV and changed the
That's
channel.
such a great example. Oh my gosh.
But this is the same thing, right? It's an evolution. And I really believe it's going to help us long term with all kinds, whether it's health related, but it's not ultimately going to replace people. Here's an example. Years ago, trainers like leadership trainers were worried that online learning was going to replace them. Here's the reality. There's still a need for face-to-face training and facilitation. They both augment each other. The same thing's going to happen with AI. Can I get a good training deck off of an AI tool? Absolutely. But you can't replace my experience to come in and talk to people. And so it makes life easier to get that slide deck put together, that training deck to put together, the facilitator notes, all of the things. But you still need me to sit down with people and have the conversation. And so I think
right.
it's just that's part of it. That interaction is going to happen there.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see where we go, but our leaders of organizations have to lean into that sense of curiosity, that soft skill that says, hey guys, I want you to explore. Start with your travel itinerary. Now, next time, why don't you create a job description and XYZ as it builds on top of itself? Me and my team have been heavily leaning into OpenAI and ChatGPT since November of 22. But I still have some team members who will literally write me on a weekly basis and say, look what I created. I didn't even know that this was possible. And so although we do formal trainings and we get the entire team into like group sessions and things like that, everybody's still exploring at their own pace. And I guess time just takes time sometimes. And that's kind of a really important lesson for us to lean into as well.
Well, think about it this way, Keenan. Apple is what I'll call the front runner, right? Like they typically are first to market and this comes about and all of the different things. And Samsung is typically the fast follower. Is Samsung still successful? Absolutely. So it's okay if some people are going to be the fast followers on AI, but they're going to have to be the fast followers, not the laggers.
Right. There was the CEO of NVIDIA, the people who make the microchips that go on all the iPhones and all of our computers and things like that, said, the biggest threat to your job is not AI. It is someone else who has figured out how to use AI to be more efficient than you are. And so it's like that is a ringing of the bell and awareness to everybody that you have to be able to adopt these tools, because very much like back in the day when my grandma used to say, it's really important for you to know how to write in cursive and write a checkbook, because when you go to the grocery store, you're going to have to use this skill for the rest of your life. Some people started exploring different types of technology like banking and all the online credit cards and XYZ. And I just think that it's really important to keep that lens of curiosity in how we explore these pieces of technology moving forward. One other thing that I'm really curious about, Chris, is the change in language when we talk about human resources. I've seen a lot of chief people officer. I've seen dream managers. I've seen chief heart officers, all of these things. Why do you think that we're changing the language and titles of these leaders in our organizations?
I have a couple of thoughts on that. I think a piece of that is human resources, which by the way was personnel when I started 33 years ago. It just has gotten a bad connotation.
Mm.
And so when you think about having a bad reputation, what do you tend to do? You rebrand. So that's one piece. I think is a bit of a rebranding. I also believe that books like The Dream Manager are starting to have an impact in organizations and helping them understand that this is a whole person that works for my company.
What is a
This
dream
is
manager?
what is a dream manager? I actually have a client that has full-time dream managers, and they
Really?
meet with them. Yes, they meet with employees. They help them figure out paths to accomplishing their dream. They help them understand what their dreams are, whether that's a vacation they've never taken, buying a house that maybe they're going to be the first person in their family to actually own a home and they don't know the path to get there, or they want to send their kids to college and they've never been able to do that. Their dream managers sit down with them and counsel them and help them find ways to make those dreams come to fruition.
I feel like I'm experiencing a moment in The Matrix or The Secret where you can like manifest an idea. There was about a month and a half ago where I was talking to one of my friends. We were on a walk together and I said, wouldn't it be amazing if we found a world where when you signed up or joined a team, an organization, right? One of the first conversations leadership had with you is, what do you want to accomplish in your life? Do you want to go back for your MBA? Do you want to go to Europe? Do you want to have more time with your kids, XYZ? Dream managers are exactly what all leaders should be in organizations to figure out where you want to go through the vehicle of this business. That is so cool.
That's right. That's cool. Have you seen, I had to grab it. There's actually a book called The Dream Manager by Matthew Kelly.
All right. You just added another book to my Audible. So I'm going to have to plug this in. Oh my gosh. So you've read this book. What are some of the key things that you took away from this?
Two things. And one is what you just said. It is not just about a dedicated position. It's great if a company has a dedicated dream manager. Leaders can play that role and should play that role. So both concepts are really talked about in that book. And it just, it's powerful to think about the fact and it's scary for some people to realize that as a leader, you have such impact on your team. That's, by the way, why when I do leadership training, I'm all about self-care, because what do leaders end up doing? They take and they take and they take, and they tend to be the first to break.
Mm. It is impossible for us to pour from an empty cup.
It is.
Right? And we have to be able to fill our own cup.
And what do they say? I mean, let's steal from the airlines. You put the oxygen mask on yourself first. I mean, it's an old saying, but it is still true today.
Man. But don't you think some of us feel guilty for treating ourselves like we treat others?
Oh yeah, we could go into all kinds of discussion about that. Maybe my therapist and I have actually talked a little bit about that, Keenan. You do feel guilty.
I feel guilty. It's I have to be very transparent. Some of the most emotional moments that I have for my personal relationships or for my team is when I am acknowledged without there being like a milestone that I've accomplished. There's been a couple times where I'll have like a whiteboard in here, and this is going to sound interesting, but everybody deserves to hear this. I walked into my office one morning and I'm literally just like grinding for weeks at a time, right? And I've been in my own zone. I'm talking to team members. I'm doing sales. I'm doing all this different type of stuff. But there was a note that was on my whiteboard one day, and my girlfriend said, "I never get to tell you enough, but I'm incredibly proud of you. I see how hard you work all the time. Just know that I see you." And I don't know what it was, but in that moment, bawling. Literally started crying, because often as a leader of an organization, we feel like we don't deserve, or I personally feel like I don't deserve the recognition because this is my job. I'm supposed to show up and help everybody else. But just feeling that sense of recognition is so soul feeling,
It is. And And I'm drawing a blank. I wish I had it on the top of my head at the moment. I know a group that is like they are putting out there trying to help leaders understand the importance of recognizing each other, right? Um, I'm an old soul, so I'm all about handwritten notes. I think they're impactful and people hold on to them. And why it's important is it's so easy to pick up the phone. It's so easy to type an email. It's so easy but to take a moment and actually think about what you want to write on a post-it note or what you want to write in a card. That means that person paused. And that's why it's so important. And, I think the hard part is, Keenan, as leaders, sometimes we don't receive it, so we don't give it.
Have you ever had, in this journey, right, 33 years now, have you ever had any type of feelings of like imposter syndrome as you've been building these businesses and taking on so much responsibility through this journey?
Oh, I might have that right now, Keenan. I'm a president. What does that mean? Am I ready for this? Is the business ready for this? Do I have the skills to be a president? I'm a great operations person, but now, and I got myself a coach because I felt like I needed somebody that could challenge me a little bit. And one of the things that she said to me was, be careful because we're so used to getting our worth from checking things off. And now as a president, I'm going to be not checking so many things off. It's going to be about strategy. It's going to be about conversations. And I'm sitting here, even though my bracelet says worthy, I'm still wondering whether or not that's actually true.
I have so much confidence in your ability to navigate this next chapter of your career, even though it comes with the title, right? I think that you have so many opportunities to lean into what you said in the very beginning of this conversation was you said it might sound a little selfish, right? But I love pouring into others. I love being able to make that human connection and helping people kind of be their best self. I'm so excited for what this next chapter is going to mean for you. When you think about the vision over the next, let's say 3 to 5 years, what are you thinking about? Where are you guys going to go?
Oh, goodness. Well, I wish I could share it, but pay attention soon. In the next few months, we've got some rebranding happening that we're pretty excited about. So that is a short-term piece. But in the long term, we feel like we can go national. We're pretty much right now in Indianapolis, but we do have some clients that are national. We feel like we can have an impact nationally. We feel like there are other services we don't offer today. So we're all into acquisition mode. And what does that look like? And then at the end of the day, there's just some things that we're noodling on that say, what are programs that we can be offering to help people be their best selves? And it's not just about being a better leader, it's about being a better person. And so in my vision and my dream, people come to True You and they go through a session that helps them with some of that dream management that you've been talking about, right? And the better and helping them be their best self.
Well, we're incredibly excited to follow along with this journey, Chris. We can check in a couple of years and come back to the show and say, hey, listen, remember when we talked back in 2024 about all this stuff? Like, look what's happened since. One of the traditions that we have here on the podcast as we put the landing gear down is our previous guest wanted to ask you a blind question. Their question is, if you had a magic wand, oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to say that again. If you had a magic wand. Okay. If you had a magic wand with one wish, what would it be?
I know exactly what it would be. So whether you're wherever you are in your spiritual realm, for me, in the Bible, there is a verse, and the verse goes something like this: I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. My wish would be that everybody realizes they are fearfully and wonderfully made exactly as they are. That's my wish.
That's incredibly powerful. Well, Chris Mills, can't thank you enough for being the definition of heart and hustle. I can't thank you enough for everybody who tuned in, watched, and listened to this episode. Really appreciate you coming on the show. It's been an absolute honor.
Kenan, thanks for having me on. It's been great.